Good morning, and thank you for coming. Thank you for filling the room with Doug. We've got some folks that have never been here before. I don't know if you've got a list of visitors. I don't know if we can get it all done this morning. But hey, Olsen. Anyway.
Well, I'll tell you that oh, she's already left. Well, I can't introduce her. This is Larry Robinson, and he was in our dorm in Singapore, and his parents were missionaries in Africa, if you've heard the Robinson name. And anyway, I've never seen him in our class before. We're really glad. His wife's name is Jubal. And there are a lot of visitors today, and we're glad to.
Yeah, thank you for coming, everybody. Sorry we're a little crowded, but that's a good problem for me. Like crowd. For those of you who are new here, Doug Tilstra helped me start this class 12 years ago, 11 years ago. Doesn't matter. 10 years ago. Time is flying.
When we were younger men.
Unfortunately, and I could hear that.
Younger.
Yeah. And so we're still shuffling people in. We're getting in those chairs now, hopefully. Why don't we take care of the seating problem before we even get started? We'll get going. But this is a Sabbath school class that we are in the life of Jesus. Doug moved away after helping. Doug is a former teacher professor at Southern Adventist University. He moved to Walla Walla 6 years ago, to take over the VP of Student Life out there, which he's had a full-time job since he moved out there with all the events in the world that have been new to us, but he has weathered that. So we're in the life of Jesus. This is a discussion class. If you have a comment, raise your hand and make your comment brief. No 3-minute orations, because we've got tons of people that want to talk. I don't want to be rude, but we want to hear from everybody. Make your point. We want to hear from you, but keep it brief so everyone will have a chance to comment. What am I missing?
Anybody that needs a book?
Oh yeah, we're okay. We have a book that we've been following for years. It's the Harmony of Gospel. All it is the 4 Gospels side by side with no comments.
You'll really want it today because we're going to do quite a bit of work that will be easier in this.
And if you don't have them, we've got tons
lots of them
of these things. Take it home with you. It's like reading the Bible. It won't hurt you, I promise. It is the Bible. It's the 4 Gospels side by side. No other authors, no other comments. Just the 4 Gospels in chronological order. So you can see how Jesus' life was progressing through his ministry and his birthday. It's all in order chronologically. So again, thank you for coming. I think that's all right. So with that said, why don't we have a word of prayer and we'll get started. Father, in these times that we live in, with these events that take place dramatically in front of our lives, and it's breathtaking what we're seeing going on in the world, from COVID to wars to recessions. We know that you're in control, Father, and sometimes we are far away, not you. Sometimes we lose our courage. We run into difficult people. We see difficult people that we're dealing with on the world stage and even in our communities. We ask that you be with Doug this morning as he talks about these kinds of events and these kinds of people. And we know that you'll put your arm around him and lead him in the right way to present this to us. We ask this in Jesus' name.
Thanks, Ken. Well, it is good to be with you. John asked me this morning, he said, does it feel like home? I said, it does. It really does feel like coming home. And it's good to see you. Today, I'd like to have you start by thinking about people that you have influence on, which I know is a lot of people. But I want you to think of a particular type. Grandparents, some grandparents are, think about your grandchildren. Maybe those of you who still have children in your home, or even with young adults, think about your children. Maybe those of you who are teachers, think about your students. Maybe if you are an employer, think about your employees. I want you to think about people that you're in fairly regular contact with and that you have some influence in their lives. Just give you a moment to get those people in mind. Now I'm going to ask you to come up with 2 words. And here's the 2 words that I want you to come up with. If you were to think of summarizing characteristics that you would like to see transforming their lives, how would you summarize that in 2 words? Just giving you 2 words. 2 words that you would say, I would like for these 2 words to describe how these people's lives are being transformed, how they're being shaped for the better. Are you with me? 2 words about people that you want to see influenced by your life. I'll give you a moment on that, and then I want to hear some ideas, what you've come up with. In fact, I'm going to write them on the board. First line. Okay. Are you counting that as 1 word or 2 word, Alden? 2. Okay. Like this. Okay. Christ like. Thank you. Somebody else.
Gracious.
Gracious. So that's 1 word. Do you want to add another one to it? You're going to leave it at that, Jerry. Okay. Please.
Humble and kind.
Humble and kind. Okay. Humble and kind. Okay. I think I saw another hand here. Wendy.
Give and serve. Give
And serve. Nice. Give and serve. And I saw a couple of hands in the back. Yes, please.
Upward look.
I'm sorry.
Upward look.
Upward look. Upwards look. And I know there were a couple more hands in the back. Clear in the back.
Loving forgiveness.
What was the word before forgiveness?
Loving.
Loving. Loving and forgiveness. Yeah. Okay.
Is this about our kids or anybody?
Anybody, but why are you asking?
So this could be about you too.
It could be. Okay, I'm going to take the hands that were still up, and then we're going to end there.
Respectful and polite.
Respectful and polite.
Selfless.
Selfless. Let me get those down, and then we'll get the last one too. So we have selfless, respectful, and polite. And just the hands that were up previously. I think I saw one here.
Happy and healthy.
Happy and healthy. I like that. And did I miss yours?
I have one.
Yeah, okay.
Open up to so-and-so.
Okay, got it. Open up. Was there one more hand I missed? Okay. Now, these are all great words. And even all of them together don't capture everything that we would like to see for transformation. Today, the story that we are looking at in the life of Jesus is a story of Jesus' ongoing transformation, especially of the 12. And we're going to look at 2 words that Jesus grabbed and used to say, here's what I want for you. Now, they're not the only 2 words, but they happen to be the 2 words that he used in one 6-month period when he was doing some very intensive work in their lives. I want to just remind you, I could draw it on the board. Let me do that. Let me just remind you where we are in the life of Jesus. Jesus' ministry lasted a little over 3 years. And part of the reason that we know that is that we can mark it by 4 different Passovers. We know that Jesus died on the Passover, and we read that in John 18. And we know that a year before that, Jesus fed the 5,000 on just before Passover. That's in John 6. So there's 1 year from feeding the 5,000 to the cross. And we know the year before that, from John 5, that the healing of the man at the pool of Bethesda was very likely at Passover. And so we get 2 years here, 3 Passovers. And we know that Jesus began his ministry, John 2, with the cleansing of the temple, driving out the money changers, etc. So we have these 4 Passovers from John 2, John 5, John 6, John 18, and that allows us to see the length of Jesus' ministry. 3 years, and he was baptized back here a few months earlier, so a little over 3 years. This first year we call the Judean Ministry because Jesus was largely in Judea and around Jerusalem. And during that time, he did not get a lot of popular support. In fact, largely it was kind of a lackluster time. And from the best evidence we can tell by about John 5 here, he is driven out of town and he's not wanted by the religious leaders. He started in the south, in the capital city, where the temple was, where the religious leaders were, and they don't want him. They push him out. Jesus goes north to Galilee and has what is known as the Galilean Ministry. This is back close to home. He grew up in Galilee, and he spends a year up there. Again, Passover to Passover. Very different in the second year of his ministry. In fact, he makes 3 tours throughout Galilee, 3 missionary tours, ministry tours throughout Galilee. And each time his popularity grows a little more, a little more, a little more. On the 3rd tour, right about here, Jesus gathers the 12 around him and he says, it's your turn to do what I've been doing. And he gives them power and authority to heal, to cast out demons, even to raise the dead. We studied this a little bit ago, and that happens right here at this 3rd tour. And he says, now go do it. And he sends them out 2 by 2. So 6 different teams going out of these 12. And we'll take a look at that actually just a little bit here. They come back and they say, let's tell you what we did. But something else has happened about that same time. John the Baptist has been beheaded right about here. So we have John the Baptist beheading, the 12 coming back from their time out on the road. And Jesus says, let's get away and rest for a little while. And you might remember how that turns out. Instead, all the people watch them where they're going, and they get these thousands of people around them, and they end up with this crowd of over 10, 15,000 people, and that's the feeding of the 5,000, which is just before Passover. Now, what happens next is critical. We've talked about this before, is that this year ends so differently than this year. This year ends with the feeding of the 5,000, and the crowds wanting to make Jesus king by force. So here he gets driven out of town. Here they want to make him king at the end of this year. And Jesus says, no, not going there. That's not where we're doing things. The next day, he has a conversation with them about it, and the people become so upset that most of them walk away. And Jesus' popularity, which has been growing to skyrocketing double-digit figures here, plummets in one day. And then Jesus does something that's very unusual. Ever since he was a boy of 12, he has gone to all the major feasts in Jerusalem. That's what's expected of all the Jewish males. He misses the first Passover in his adult life. So all these crowds are heading south, about 75 miles south from Galilee down to Jerusalem. And Jesus turns and goes north and leaves the country. And he misses the first Passover in his adult life. So he goes north, the crowds go south, and his popularity has gone down, and now he's out of circulation for 6 months. And the reason we know it's 6 months is here we have the Feast of Tabernacles. Feast of Tabernacles is in the fall. So think Easter to Thanksgiving. Spring to fall. During this 6 months, Jesus is out of circulation. He's out of the country for much of that time, and he's focusing on the 12, teaching them, and he's focusing on the Gentiles, reaching out to them. Now, the reason all this is important is because right here, when Jesus sends them out, he gives them these 2 words that we're going to talk about in a minute. And when we get to just before here, about 6 months later, we come back to those 2 words. And what we find here as a success story, we find here as a failure story. And what we're going to see is that during these 6 months here, Jesus is working hard to teach them something, and they could be encapsulated in these 2 words, is what he's trying to teach them here. Are you all with me so far? Okay. So what I want us to do, now that you see where we're going here, this success to this failure. The last 6 months here is where Jesus shows up at the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem, and he is pressing toward the cross. In fact, he is poking the hornet's nest as he heads toward the cross. And we're going to be studying this in just a little bit. We're almost there. Interestingly enough, even though it's the last 6 months and even the last week, it takes up about 30% of all the accounts in the Gospels because it's so significant what's going on here. But what we're looking at right now is right here. What I want you to see in the story we're about to read is how Jesus is using 2 big ideas here. And no surprise to you, these are 2 things that he models very well. And he is modeling these to the people, and he wants them, particularly the 12, to become like him. So our first one here, well, I erased it. Who was it that said Christ-like? That's a good way to encapsulate it, because he wants them to become like him. And we're going to put it in 2 words here. So with that, let's go to our story today. You have a bit of a context where we are. We are right here, just before the Feast of Tabernacles. So in your harmony, open to number 88. That's on page 105. And you'll notice that this is told by Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John does not tell this story. That's why there's an empty column there with John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the synoptics, all tell this story. And oddly enough, Mark, who is usually the briefest, tells this story in the greatest length. I don't know why, but Mark is the more detailed author on this one. Now, as we often do, we're going to read this by following the bold print. And by following the bold print, that'll take us through each of the writers, but you'll see that a lot of it does come from Mark. And then, of course, Luke had some details, Matthew had some details. So let's start up there at the top of the page. Number 88, page 105, starting with Luke's account. The next day, we'll come back to that in a minute, what was going on the day before. The next day, when they came down from the mountain, when they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. What are you arguing with them about? He asked. A man in the crowd approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son. my only child, who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. A spirit seizes him, and he suddenly screams. It throws him into convulsions to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. It scarcely ever leaves him and is destroying him. He often falls into the fire, into the water. I brought him to your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not heal him. They could not heal him. It's a desperate dad. Oh, unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied. How long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, while the boy was coming, the demon immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, how long has he been like this? From childhood, he answered. It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you could do anything, take pity on us and help us. If you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for him who believes. Immediately, the boy's father exclaimed, I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, he said, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. The spirit shrieked, convulsed violently, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed from that moment. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, he's dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. He gave him back to his father, and they were all amazed at the greatness of God. Now that's how Luke ends the story. Notice, Luke ends it with the people. By the way, I'm sorry for ignoring you guys online. Good to see you. Luke ends the story with the people all amazed at the greatness of God. Matthew, an eyewitness. Mark, working from the eyewitness account of Peter, tell what happened next. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, because you have so little faith. I tell you the truth, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. This kind can come out only by prayer. And you'll notice that Matthew emphasizes the faith, Mark emphasizes the prayer, and if you look in the footnote, it says some manuscripts add prayer and fasting. So it could be prayer and fasting, it could be prayer. Matthew and Mark tell the behind the scenes, what happened after everybody was amazed and went home. The disciples said, how come we failed? Why couldn't we do this? We did it back here. And that's what I want you to see. Are you with me? Now, this story is so rich, and I say this to you every time. These stories have so many things in them. Usually, when I teach and preach from this story, what I like to focus on is the dad. The dad. I mean, that's, how can you ignore that? This heartbroken dad said, if you can do something, please do it. And Jesus says, if. I mean, that almost seems a little bit cold, right? And the dad says, okay, I believe, but you've got to help my unbelief. That would be a beautiful part of the story to focus on. And we could. It's there, but it's not what we're going to focus on today. There's other parts that we could focus on. Duane, thank you for your lesson last week on the Transfiguration. When it says in Luke, the next day when they came down from the mountain, that's coming down from the mountain of Transfiguration. And Duane covered that beautifully for us last week. And this is what happens the very next day. The three are coming down from the Mount of Transfiguration. They've been with Jesus there all night. They've seen this amazing picture of Jesus shining in glory, talking with Moses and Elijah about his departure, which he's about to accomplish in Jerusalem. The death and resurrection of Jesus is their conversation. And they've seen that, and coming down, they're discussing it. We can read that here. If you look over in 87, it says in Mark, as they were coming down from the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. And they kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. So this is the next day. So these three are coming down with Jesus from this all-night experience. And the 9 are at the foot of the mountain, and they are knee-deep in manure. Because things are not looking good for them. In fact, they are starting to become the laughingstock of all this group. And this is a strange experience for them because they have cast out demons before. And why can't they do it now? Okay? So feel the difference here. Jesus is coming off the mountaintop with the three who have just seen Jesus shining in glory with Moses and Elijah. They're kind of, feeling the glow of that still. Meanwhile, what are the 9 doing down here? They are sweating bullets. I just captured the difference between Jesus and the 3 coming down and the 9 with the crowd gathering up. That's an important emotional concept to capture what's going on with these 2 different groups. So we can spend some time on that. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but just notice what's going on here. You getting some other folks here?
Trying to.
Okay, so there's that. Then there's also this idea of being possessed by a spirit. And I know that people have long discussions about demon possession. Is this mental illness? Is this epilepsy? Is it? We're not going to go there. But I know that's a worthwhile discussion. So that's something else that could be discussed from this passage and could be quite relevant. In fact, if any of you have doubts about whether demon possession is a thing, let me just tell you it is.
It is.
It is. It is. It is. Even in our Western world.
Yes, it is.
So we'll just leave that for right now. There's another part of this. Look down at the bottom of the page in Luke's account. The dad is saying, it scarcely ever leaves him and is destroying him. Well, we can spend a lot of time on that too. Because anything from the evil one destroys us. Whether it's bitterness, whether it's hatred, whatever it is, it destroys us. And we can spend some time on that. I mean, there's just so many pieces of this story we could look at, but we're not going to look at those. Instead, what I want to focus on, come back to the end of the story. Mark 9, middle of the page, top of 107. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? Again, notice the contrast here. The crowd is all amazed at the greatness of God. And these 9 guys are saying, don't get it. Why couldn't we do this? Why did we fail? And they're feeling like, we've got some chairs up here. I don't know if anybody wants to brave it. I know. Hard. Huge contrast between what the crowd is feeling and what the 9 are feeling. They're even having a hard time just entering into the joy of all this because they keep saying, why couldn't we do it? What went wrong? And it's that takes us back to these 2 words. So let's get there. For this, you'll need to flip back and let's just quickly scan all the way back to this in our harmonies. And for that, you'll want to go back to page 82. Go back to page 82. And this takes us to this time period right here. And those of you that don't have a harmony, that would be roughly Matthew 10, Mark 6, and Luke 9. And I want you to notice what happens here. 6 months earlier, 6 months before this, notice what Jesus does as he sends the 12 out. He says, let's look at it from Luke chapter 9, up at the top of page 83. He gave them power and authority to drive out demons and to cure diseases, and he sent them out to preach the kingdom of God. Clearly, Jesus had given them the power to drive out demons. Or look over in Matthew, the account in Matthew, just across the page, Matthew 10 and verse 8. Freely you have received, freely give. There's an abundance here. Jesus is giving them the power to go do the things that he has done. Turn the page.
Doug, you missed one thing.
Yeah, please.
In Luke 9, he cast out all demons.
Yeah.
The word all.
Oh, thank you. All demons. Yeah, they've been given incredible power. Turn the page and look at the end of this account. Matthew 10, top of page 85. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went out from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee, over to Luke 9. So they set out and went from village to village, preaching the gospel, over to Mark 6. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. And back over to Luke, and healing people everywhere. They had experienced back here 6 months earlier incredible success. And now they experienced here very embarrassing failure. What happened in between? Why were they so successful here and so unsuccessful here? 6 months later. Let me just stop and pause with you there for a second. Anybody want to reflect on that? Because these are the lessons that we've been reading, the scripture we've been reading and discussing the last little bit here. Can you think of any reason why they may have moved from success to failure here?
Was their faith dwindling?
I'm sorry?
Was their faith dwindling?
Yeah, their faith is dwindling. Excellent, Alan. Thank you.
They were dependent on, they were channeling Jesus the first time,
Yeah.
and they were doing it themselves.
Yeah, the difference between channeling Jesus the first time and doing it on their own the next time. Yes. Jenna. I'm sorry?
Pride goes.
Pride comes before a fall. Yeah, can't you just imagine them saying, bring it on. Yeah, we've got this.
And didn't
You want to take it, Thomas? No, I'll do the next one. You do it. Okay, please, Marlene.
I don't know exactly why. However, today, as you were emphasizing, why couldn't we do it? You underscored the we. It seems to me that in this time, they were doing it like a, look what I am doing. Instead of giving the glory to God, they were trying to showcase themselves, their power.
Yes.
That's what I understood from what you were saying today.
Excellent. And Marlene, I've not forgotten the email that you sent me this morning about difficult people, because actually I asked you to look at this lesson through the lens of difficult people. And we'll come back to that. But Jesus is having difficulty with these guys from year to year. If it's hard for them, how must it be for Jesus? Right? Jesus must have felt very good about what was happening here and very sad about what's happening here. Okay, please.
Weren't they seeking also to be number one among themselves?
Yes. We don't have as many records of that here, but we have others. And we know it was a continuous conversation. Which one was going to be the greatest? Yeah. Which one was going to be number one? Good. Any other thoughts? Please.
wasn't it when they came back from that experience that they were rejoicing with that even the demons were cast out? And Jesus said, don't rejoice over that. Rejoice that your name is written in
I thought that it was that same time, but it's not. I looked it up, and it's actually a little bit later, but it's a good connection. Anybody else? Ken?
These guys have suddenly left the stage. They have totally dismissed the agony of the dead, and they're focusing on their photo.
Yes. Could you all catch that? Here's this dad, desperate, agonizing, and they have so forgotten him and are only thinking about their own embarrassment. And somebody, we've erased the story, but somebody said selfless. These guys are being very self-focused, very self-absorbed. Yeah, excellent. Okay, one more, Linda.
One more thing is Judas must have been included in receiving all of this power and authority. And look what's happened to him again.
Oh, I'm glad you got that. Did you all catch that?
No.
Okay. If back in Matthew 10, when Jesus sends about 2 by 2, it was not 5.5 teams. It was 6 teams. And Judas was paired up with somebody. And it says they all came back and they all had healed and so forth. And Judas apparently had experienced the joy of giving generously to others that Jesus had given to him. And that's a powerful thought. Yeah, but we're not going there. Okay, so let's come back now. Okay, you're still here. I'm about to show you these 2 words. And they may surprise you. And Abner, could I have help in turning the board around? Because I have 2 pictures. Don't laugh. I even looked up some pictures online, how to draw a simple picture of a snake and a simple picture of a dove. And somehow my dove got a bit of a hump back here. Anyway, this is supposed to be a dove, and this is supposed to be a snake. And I want you to notice in these instructions, look at Matthew 10 again, page 84. Jesus is in the middle of giving all these instructions. Matthew 10 is one long set of instructions before he sends them out. Now, I don't have my chart to point to, but at the beginning of that 6 months right here, this is what he said to them before he sends them out. And notice what's right here buried in this. He says,
Which verse?
I'm sorry, verse 16. I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as harmless or innocent as doves. And you say, how anticlimactic is that? 2 words. Snakes and doves? Shrewd and harmless? Well, let's just focus a little bit here. If you look at other translations, okay, so here in the NIV, this word is shrewd. If you're familiar with the King James, what's the word?
Wise.
Wise, it's the word wise. If you do a quick search in other translations, do you know any other ways that that word is translated? I don't know if you have it on your phone. If you look, some of them are cunning. Some are wary. Anybody have a quick app that you can look those up?
By the way, if you'll give that dove an eyeball, you'll save your artistic integrity.
Well, I thought I had one.
To the right. That's
Put
a
your
beak.
eye in the
That's a beak.
Oh, well, it was supposed to be. Okay. Well, let's do that. Man, you're a genius.
There you go.
There. Wonderful. Okay, so other words here: shrewd, wise, cunning, wary, clever. Okay, so you see these are all kind of the same sort of description. And I actually like the King James Version with wise. It's a shrewd sort of wise, as you can see here in cunning, wary, clever, other translations. Now the word over here, harmless, that one may seem kind of strange. Harmless is the word used in, is that the one used here in the NIV? Innocent, uses the word innocent. Okay. Innocent. Other words are simple. Other translations, let's see, I wrote down several here. Inoffensive.
It's interesting though, these are not negative and positive. God, these are both positive.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Rod. This is not negative and positive. I heard another word here.
Gentle.
Gentle. Yeah. Okay. Now, there were many things that Jesus wanted the 12 to be. The night before he was crucified, he said, I want you to love others as I've loved you. I mean, how can we beat that? And so I would say these are not different than love. In fact, there's one way that you might say these are ways in a specific situation to experience love and to give it to others. Jordan?
I was thinking that it's almost going to be the first time they're off on their own. Mm-hmm. And they have done a lot of things. They've seen a lot of things, but Jesus was always there.
Yep.
Help kind of guide the ship.
Yep.
And I think he's trying to say, look, you need to be cunning like the snake.
Yep.
I'm not going to be there to give you that advice.
You're bang on. That's exactly right. Jesus had been for them the crafty, cunning, clever, making his way through landmines. And it had never been in order to attack people and to bully them. It had always been in the service of being gentle, caring for. We see these two as opposite. I think, Rod, that was again your comment. These aren't opposite. Jesus embodied these both. I'm not going to have you look this up right now, but jot it down. Revelation chapter 5. Revelation chapter 5 uses another two animals, by the way, here. I'm not trying to draw them, so just relax. It uses over here a lion, and what does it use over here? And here's how it pictures it. In Revelation 5, John is seeing this marvelous view of the throne room. And then he sees a job that needs to be done. And it's a big job that affects the whole universe. And the angel, it's a dramatic scene. The angel says, nobody can do this. And John starts crying. He says, but it needs to be done. And then there's a voice that says, the Lion, the tribe of Judah will do this. And so he turns around to see a lion. And instead, what does he see? He sees the lamb. The lion is the lamb, and the lamb is the lion. And when the lion needs to do its work, it sometimes shows like a lamb, and it sometimes shows up like a lion. And this is a beautiful part of Jesus' life, and we're getting to the heart of what we're talking about now. Because when Jesus gave them two words, he said, what you see in me could seem contradictory, and it's not. I am both lamb and lion. I am both dove and snake. I am both harmless and shrewd. Are you following me? And when Jesus sends them out on their own, he says, you want to know how to really be like me in these difficult situations? And now, Marlene, we're coming to this. With difficult people, you have to be shrewd and wise as a snake, and you have to be harmless and simple as a dove. And some of us have a hard time with one, and some of us have a hard time with others, and some of us have a hard time with both. Lucy.
I was looking into the Spanish
version, and it says prudent and humble.
Oh, thank you. We knew there was a reason that Spanish is the language of heaven. Prudent and humble. Excellent. Prudent and humble. Now, what I want us to do in the remainder of our class, because this is going somewhere, and let's turn it around again. Let me use those words here. Prudent and humble. What the 12 experienced back here is when Jesus sent them out, he said, I am sending you out as lambs among wolves. Notice there's 4 animal analogies he's using here. I'm sending you out like lambs among wolves, and I want you to be as snake doves, dove snakes. And I want you to pull together what seems to be opposite qualities, but they're not. And you see them both in me. And what you've seen in me, I want to be in you. I want you to experience that as you are out there on the front lines doing what I've been doing. And so they go out and they do it, and they're snake doves, dove snakes. And they come back and they say, woo! And then 6 months later, they say, whoa.
That's why sometimes in our culture, we have trouble with justice and mercy.
That would be another thing here, wouldn't it be? Justice, mercy.
I'm not sure this is right.
Okay.
I think the more, or I'm not sure it's relevant, but the more I understand Christ, the more I also understand evil. As my knowledge of Christ goes up, my knowledge of evil goes up. And coming back from what Marlene said, that doesn't mean I'm going to shy away from difficult people. Difficult people sometimes makes me better. I am going to shy away from evil, and that exists.
Difficult does not equal evil.
No,
not at all. And to pull this together, wow, we've only got 15 minutes. What I want to do is I want to take you in a quick overview of the 6-month period here to see how Jesus models this for them. And in spite of his modeling, they fall flat on their face. I want you to see that. I want you to admire Jesus. I don't want you to come out of here feeling beat up and saying, well, I'm too much of a snake and not enough of a dove. Or I'm too much of a dove and not enough of a snake. I want you to come out of here saying, wow, can you believe that Jesus is the ultimate lion lamb? Jesus is the ultimate snake dove. I want you to come out admiring Jesus, because as you admire Jesus, you become more like him. And I want you to become more like him. As Jesus sent his 12 out with 2 words, he said, I want you to be like this. And you see it in me. I want you to be like that. Now let's really quickly look at these 6 months here. So they come back, and you'll find that on page 87, harmony number 72. This is the feeding of the 5,000. So we're at this spot right here. We're a year before the cross. We're a year before the cross. And they come back. Mark tells us, chapter 6, then because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. How do you see Jesus acting like a snake there?
Being smart.
He's being very smart, very strategic. He's saying, you cannot always be in this frenzy of activity. Let's be strategic about this. How's he being like a dove?
Nurturing.
Nurturing. Yeah, get aside. Let's rest. He's doing both at the same time. Okay, we can see this all if you turn the page. Look at the account from Mark here in the middle of the page. He had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. What does that feel like, Lord? Snake or dove? Okay. His compassion is the dove like. His teaching, who knows? Maybe a little bit more snake-like. And on it goes. I love this. When the disciples say, send them away, Jesus says, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. What does that feel more like? It feels a little snaky to me, right?
And compassionate.
And compassionate. Yeah, there's this incredible blend in Jesus. Incredible blend. Oh, we could go on and on. You could find 4 or 5 more examples in this story, the feeding of 5,000. But just turn the page. Let's look at the next story. I want you to notice here in John 6, bottom of page 90. John is the only one that tells this part. Verse 15, John 6:15. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. But notice how Matthew and Mark add a detail here. Matthew especially. Immediately, Jesus urged the disciples to get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side. Why would Jesus need to urge the disciples to get in the boat and leave?
Impending violence.
Yeah.
Pending violence. Somebody else?
Well, they wouldn't become part of the problem.
Wouldn't become part of the problem. Keep going. You're walking around it.
And they didn't want to leave.
Maybe they didn't want to leave. Why would they not want to leave?
Power ahead.
They wanted the same thing the mob wanted.
See the power that they would have.
They wanted exactly the same thing the mob wanted. The mob wanted to make Jesus king, and they said, whoa, this is the moment we've been waiting for. We have thousands of people making us ready to do this. And Jesus says, you guys leave. I'll take care of the crowd. Please.
I think the disciples were mad.
I think they were
irritated.
Yep.
And they were thinking whether they wanted to hang around or not.
Yeah.
You know, I think they got the boat. Yeah, maybe he urged them to get in the boat, but I think there was some of them that says, yeah, great. You know,
we're out of here.
We don't really want to be around you right now anyway, because you're not doing what we want.
You're not doing what we want.
And even part of this said when he walked out to them, you and I talked about this. One iteration here, forgot where it was, where Jesus walked by the boat.
Yep.
And you know, Jesus was seeing if he was going to be invited in.
Yeah, you're going to invite me back.
And my theory was they voted to let Jesus back in the boat, but it wasn't a unanimous vote.
Yes.
I didn't want him there.
Okay, all kinds of stuff going on here. And in the middle of this, Jesus is both snake and dove. He is shrewd, he is wise, he is moving forward with a plan, and he's doing it with a gentle, what's the word? Humbleness there. That is caring for them rather than trying to just take care of himself. It's incredible. Yes, Ron.
He dissipated 20,000 people single-handedly.
Yep.
He wasn't real gentle.
No, good point.
Authoritative.
Jesus is incredibly authoritative when he says, party's over. Go home. That's snake-like. Okay, you're getting the rhythm here, right? Okay, let's just look at a couple of other quick stories.
Abner.
I'm sorry.
When you consider Jesus and Satan, they're both alpha males.
Yeah.
But Jesus does it in a much different way than the
Yes.
devil does. The devil always kicks in the door and points in your face, and Jesus goes, come with me.
Yeah. Beautiful. Lynn, was that a handout? Okay. So let me just have you look at a couple of others. Look over on page 93. And this is the next day after defeating the 5,000. When they say, Rabbi, when did you get here? Because they hear about this miraculous storm and walking on the water and all that. And Jesus answered, verse 26, so I tell you the truth, you are looking for me not because you saw miraculous signs, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life. Jesus gets in their face here. Fairly shrewd, fairly wise, somewhat snake-like, and yet all in the service of what will help them. This is not so that he can attack them for the satisfaction of attacking them. He is blunt and direct to get their attention so that they will be healed. Remember the story as we started out. The boy was being destroyed by what was inside of him. These people are being destroyed by what's inside of them. And Jesus is very direct with that. Well, we can go on. Let's just scan through a couple others. Comment in this one? Okay, Ken.
So like your house is falling down and you said, well, my drill doesn't work today.
Your house is falling down, my drill doesn't work today. Okay, look at, oh, well, we can look at number 77 on pages 94 and 95. When Jesus has to confront the Pharisees here, look over in Mark 7, verse 9. You have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. Jesus gets slightly sarcastic with him here. You have a fine way of setting aside God's command. It's a little snaky. But not so that he can just bite them and say, take that. Jesus actually got the snakiest with the religious leaders and trying to get their attention. But he also wept some of his hottest tears over them.
Well,
End of Matthew 23.
He also tried to, after he said that though, he did follow that up with trying to explain to them what he was talking about.
Exactly, which is more dove-like. Yeah. Okay. You flip on through. We could take a look at a couple of others. Oh, this one, you got to see this one. We did this a few weeks ago. Number 78, page 96 and 97. This is probably the classic one. Remember, the woman comes pleading for help. She's a Gentile. Jesus is north. He's, in this time period, he's out of the country, out of pocket. And this Gentile woman says, please heal my daughter. And Jesus says, it's not right to give the children's food to dogs. Whoa, that sounds snaky or what? And the disciples are, yeah, give it to her. They're all for this snaky side of Jesus. We talked about this already. How many of you were here today that we studied that? So she comes back. She has a little snakiness to herself. She says, yes, Lord, she replied, but even the dogs under the table eat children's crumbs. Then Jesus answered, woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And that beautiful dove-like quality just comes out. Okay, I think you get the idea. I want you to come back to it so we can go on and on to these stories, but I want you to now jump to the story because we need to pull it back to this. All through this 6 months, Jesus is demonstrating in everything he does how the snake and the dove, how the prudence and the humility, how the wisdom and the harmlessness are combined in his own life. And he's wanting the disciples to see it. And even after they've had beautiful success here, they watched Jesus for all these 6 months with very intentional teaching. And they come to this moment. And I would tend to agree with some of the comments that some of you made earlier. I think that when the 3 left on the mountaintop, even though the 9 did not know what was going on, and the 3 weren't, remember, allowed to speak about it until after Jesus' resurrection. And so it got worse when they came back and said, what happened up there? Can't tell you. How would that make you feel if you were one of the 9 left behind? Jealous. Very jealous. And the mood among the 9 is not snake dovey. It's more snaky. It's pretty bad. So that when we come to the end of the story, and here's where I want you to focus. Again, there's such richness in the story, but just come to the end. Where they come to Jesus and they say, why couldn't we drive it out? Now, think of what's in their head. We did it here. We did it many times back here. Many times. Why couldn't we do it? Why? Why couldn't we do it? And Jesus says, this kind comes out only by prayer. What would the implication of that be?
They're not in contact with God.
They were not in contact with God. They were much more aware of each other. And particularly those three probably that were up there getting something they weren't getting.
Depends on whether on your God's mission or your mission doing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. God's mission or your mission? Yeah.
Sometimes a simple prayer does not do what a prayer life does.
Yes. Did you all hear that? Difference between a prayer life and a prayer. They were obviously not living in connection with God here. There was something else going on. And Matthew gives us that by saying, this part of what Jesus said, because you have what? So little faith. And you say, wait a minute. They apparently had prayer. They had faith back here. And now you mean 6 months later, after all this experience with Jesus, they have less prayer and less faith? Apparently so. How can that be? How can it be that hanging out face to face in Jesus' presence and they end up with less faith and less prayer here than they had here? How's that happen?
I think Matthew 17, where Jesus said, the first thing he said when they presented it to him was, unbelieving and perverse generation, how long will I be with you? I think
that kind of captures it, doesn't it? Did you all catch that in verse 17 of Matthew 17, or Matthew 17? How long will I put up with you? Talking about difficult people. How long will I put up with you? Okay, we got two hands. I think Roy's and
what I was going to say, relative to be selfless, is that this is the power of God in us, not us. And we need to remember that this has to be selfless for us to have this kind of power on God's God.
So true. Please.
It seems like the disciples were getting cocky and self-confident.
Yeah, very likely. Very likely, which would have led to their discussions about who's the greatest. I missed a comment here. She said the disciples are probably getting cocky, self-confident, which would be in harmony with the things we read about them saying who's the greatest. Well, here's what I'd like to do in the last couple minutes we have. Again, I want you to consider that Jesus perfectly models this. And it's going to get more and more intense. It just keeps getting more and more intense all the way to the cross. To the point that when we get to the cross, Jesus is modeling this about 150%. Because there's very little that isn't dove-like about a cross. Harmless, innocent, simple, laying one life down. But that's not all that's there. There's also the snakiness of Jesus being very strategic, of him saying to Pilate when he's on trial, saying, don't think you have any power over me. You would have no power over me unless God had given it to you. Or when they come to get him in the garden, remember this, John chapter 18? They come out to get him and they all fall wham down to the earth. And Jesus just stands there waiting. And I think with a half smile on his face says, now who was it you said you were looking for? You just love it. It's clear that Jesus is saying, like you said in John 10, no man takes my life from me. I lay it down. You think you're taking your life? You think that I'm some harmless little dove that can't protect himself? You are underestimating me. There's a snake beneath that dove. It's both. It's both. He's the lion and the lamb. What I'd like to close on is this. I'd like you to look in the book of Isaiah, and if you have your Bibles, Isaiah chapter 53. And I had not ever really noticed this until today, that Isaiah 53 starts off, most of it, about 90% of it, with Jesus as a dove, and it ends up with him as a snake. Look at it. We won't read the whole thing, but just capture part of it. Isaiah 53. Verse 3, for example. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering, like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised and we esteemed him not. Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows. Yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. That's not a description of a dove. I don't know what is. Notice how it ends. There's a lot of good reading here, but just drop down to the end. Verse 11. After the suffering of his soul, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death. It was the very dove-like death of Jesus that allowed him to come out strong and great at the end. And we tend to think of these two as opposite. You've got to either choose to be this or this. And Jesus says, if you really want to learn what it is to love people, allow God to work both of these. He had two words for his disciples that set him out. He said, you like snakes, you like doves. You see it both in me. Allow me to do that in you.
Amen.
Amen.
You have a Bible teacher like that every day for 12 years. Where would you be today? What happened to your life? Which turns would you not have made when you made the wrong turn? Master teacher, a dedicated person that helped me build this class. Was going nowhere until he showed up with me, and he had a lot of problems of his own, but he took me on and helped this class get going. It's an amazing thing. Our motto is, are you a little better off when you walk out of here than when you walk in? I hope today you're a little better off as you walk out. This was an escape from me. I have problems like everybody else. But for 1 hour, it all went away. I was free. Free from my burden for 1 hour. It was worth everything. Everything. 4 or 5 years ago, there was a young person who came and joined this class. Doug was teaching that day, and he had graduated from Southern, and Doug had hit it out of the park that day, like he did today. And this kid comes up to me, he's in his late 20s, and he says, who is that guy? I said, he's a teacher at Southern. And he said, what does he teach? I said, well, he used to teach the life of Jesus. It was teachings of Jesus when I was in college here. The worst class I ever took in my life, by the way. The worst. The bottom class. It's horrible. And he says, teachings of Jesus. Man, they didn't teach it like that when I was in school. Amen. This is what makes the difference. This is why I want you here anytime you can. That's why I want Doug here anytime you here. I want to thank Linda for the cards, taking that by the horns and making sure that we remember little Sam, who was run over by a car. He made it last week. He made it through surgery. Still has brain injuries. We have a lady whose son is suffering from cancer. Thank you you shame me with your kindness every week. I can't keep up with you. Thanks for jumping in here, Abner, for what he does. They make the things happen. They make people feel better. Marge, with her ministry, her welcoming. Thank you so much. If something were to happen to me, I want you to know that this has been one of the best experiences of my life. Amen. If you want to get on our email list, Doug writes the lessons every week. Come see me. We'll get you on the list, and you'll get the lesson today or in the morning. What am I missing? Anything else? John, would you have our prayer?
Father, thank you for this wonderful day, for this great lesson. Thanks for speaking to each one of us through God. As we leave today, help us remember the challenges that are in our world today. Be with the people of Ukraine. Be with travel. Thank you for bringing Doug and Miranda to us safely, bring them home safely. as others in our family as they enjoy spring breaks. Father, again, help us understand this lesson as you would want us to understand it. Help us appreciate and understand prayer even more. Again, thank you for your gifts, particularly Doug. We ask in your name. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Doug is here if you want to come up and say anything. I'm sure he will actually talk to you.